All right, we are live. We are live. You guys know the routine. Gonna just do my startup and then we will get it going. I hope you guys are doing great today. One done. Let me go get the other one. And done. All right, let's get into it. Let's see what we got going on here. Greetings from Portugal. Welcome from Portugal. Greetings from Roswell, New Mexico. Greetings. If Scott doesn't start with his mic muted, I'm heading off. Sorry, I'm starting to get it figured out little by little over here. From the Far East, hello from Russia, from RU, Amsterdam, and Moscow. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome. It's good to have everybody in here today. We have a lot to go over. I think I'm losing my voice a little bit, so if I start to get a little raspy, that's what's going on. Hopefully everybody is doing good today. All right, we can go ahead and get started here. Let's take it over to the good old map, the Mapperoonie, the map special. All right, let's zoom out and let me make sure everything is set up right here. All right, so before we get started, I just wanted to go ahead and say thank you all for joining me today. We have quite a bit to talk about. With the map, at least, not so much going on outside of the map. It's been a little bit slow, but you know, the conflict kind of goes through these ups and downs where the beginning of the week will be slow, and then there'll be one day of the week where we get the most updates that you've ever seen. So it's just a little bit of a slow time right now. There are updates coming out. We will talk about them. If you guys did want to find my more frequent updates when I'm not doing live streams, which my live streams are not always daily, I do them when there's news to talk about. You can do so by going to the link in the YouTube description and following me on my Twitter and my Telegram, as well as going over and following my Patreon, where I do have more content over there for you guys. But yes, without further ado, let's go ahead and just hop right into it. We got a question already. Scott goes live. Day instantly got better. I'm glad, man. I'm glad. I am losing my voice though a little bit. So if I start to fade in this live stream, I do apologize. I'm going to try my best to stay on top of it. All right, let's start with the Kharkov region, where the Ukrainians have, at least on my map, improved their position. Remember, guys, this map is always going to be behind where the actual front is, just because there are so many unknowns about this map that and it's so sparsely populated that the Ukrainians can be all over the place and never have control of an area. The Ukrainians can claim to have control over a whole area, and there not be very many Ukrainians really actually controlling that area. So there's a lot of unknowns in this Kursk region right now. Nothing has changed over here as of this point with the bridges that were taken out over the Rekisim River up here in Russia. So nothing big has changed here. And then we just have a slight expansion out of Stuzda. This map is probably not accurate, but again, this is just where the Ukrainians have been geolocated. They have been spotted in this area. And yeah, so these are just the changes to the Kursk salient so far. Could be more, could be less. Again, I don't like to update these maps when the activity is so fluid and there's so much DRG activity, because you never know what is actually controlled and what is just PR and so on and so forth. All right. Moving down into the Peshani section of the front, the Kupiansk front, if you will. The Russians have advanced. I think this advance is slightly older, but I added it. So this is more of a frontline update than an actual Russian advance in terms of the chronology of the map. But again, it is another important update. Have expanded the flank of Peshani out here towards Kolesnivka. All right, moving down to the Kleshchevka area, and I'm going to actually take you guys over to the topographical map for this one. So I'm going to just open that up real fast. But let me get back to the map. Okay, so the Ukrainians have the Ukrainians ended up losing this entire fortification up here on the high ground and lost the key height in the region, which means that the Russians now controlled the dominant high ground. Since this has happened, the Russians have pushed out and captured another section of high ground here. And this is the push that I was expecting months ago. It never ended up coming from the Russians, or the Ukrainians were just keeping it under wraps and not allowing the Russians to actually break out of the area. So let me go over here to my topographical map and I will show you guys this. Okay, so here's Klishchevka. Here's that high ground that was lost. There is that tactical height in this area. I don't know which one it is exactly, but there is one area here that is slightly higher than all of the other areas on this high ground. And the Russians have now pushed up and captured this portion of high ground right here. So not a massive advance on the map, but in terms of what it means to the control over this side of the canal, this is huge. This is going to progressively get worse as the Russians continue to advance towards the canal. And then, as I had mentioned, and as we will be able to see when I go back to my map here for you guys, it's starting to show exactly what I had thought of for my for what I thought the Russians were going to really focus on in capturing Toretsk. I did not expect Shumi, Zelensky, Privnichi, Deshane, I'm sorry, not Deshane, Druzhba, and New York and Nelipivka to all just fall as quickly as they did. I did not expect the Russians to be able to assault head on into these fortifications. I didn't think that that was the way that the battle was going to go at all. I did mention that if the Russians were to do some sort of, oh wait, this is not supposed to be here anymore. If the Russians, actually, I will leave that just for now. The Russians were supposed to be, if the Russians were to get in through this area, it was to be with some sort of tunneling operation, which we did see through New York. So the Russians actually did do the exact same thing they did in Avdiivka. Avdiivka, and did a tunnel operation. But still, this entire area should not have fallen as quickly as it did with the amount of fortifications that were available for the Ukrainians. This is a very, very bad sign that the Russians are already at Toretsk, and the Russians will probably reach Konstantinovka from Toretsk before they reach it from Chasiv Yar, Stopochki, or the south over here from Pokrovsk direction. So this is a massive collapse that I didn't even see coming. I expected, like I showed, the flanks to be pushed out, but that didn't end up happening. So now we're starting to begin to see the beginnings of that, which will probably hasten the Battle of Toretsk for the Russians. All right. Okay. Moving down here to the Pokrovsk section, we have a couple of key updates here, some important updates. The Russians have advanced south of Horivka through these fields, which is not a big deal in and of itself. The field isn't important, but now the Russians are going to be pushing the city from not only the east, but also the south now, and the Ukrainians will likely have to pull out into this defense line back here that runs behind the town. The Russians will be able to enter into this town and then use this town as a jumping off point for assaults on Myrolobovivka and Minohrad. So this is going to be an important location for them. If you look, this is the biggest settlement in the area since Orchitny, which is where what the Russians are now using for their staging position for this entire front, which you can see is very much in the rear now. The Russians are looking for a new area to begin staging. Novoselivka Persha has been completely destroyed. So the Russians are looking for a new logistics hub and staging position to begin assaults further onto the Pokrovsk section. They have two that are coming under their control. Hordivka right here, which now they can approach from the south, which is a big deal. And Novohodrivka down here, the kind of sister cities, Hordivka and New Hordivka. And as you can see, the Russians have entered Hordivka, Novohordivka down here in the south. And it is reported that the Russians now claim control about half of the city. The Russians have also advanced through these fields, expanding their control outside of Zurovka, and will now be able to put pressure through these fields also on this side of the town. Novohordivka should fall in the coming days. Its logistics lines are already threatened here, and it really doesn't have much option, especially now that this hill is taken. Logistics coming in on this road into town are cut off. The Russians have probably already made it to a point as well where from inside the city, they can direct fire onto this road very accurately. I'll add to that the already struggling Ukrainian units in this area in terms of manpower. We're looking at a much, much more difficult situation for the Ukrainians in Novohordivka with these advances, and likely the city will be under Russian control very shortly. And as you can see, these are the last two stepping stones, Novohordivka and Hordivka, before we start the Battle of Pokrovsk in earnest, right? So once the Russians reach these defense lines, these are the defense lines of Pokrovsk. This will mark the beginning of the Battle of Pokrovsk. Big stuff is about to happen. Okay, over here, we have a massive Ukrainian withdrawal that is currently happening. The Ukrainians are retreating out of this northern part of this salient. They retreated from Zvitny, Komishivka, and Peshe. I want to say it's Peshe, but I'm not sure. They've retreated out of these three towns right here. And it is being reported that the Ukrainians have also retreated out of Kalinove, which again just makes sense. I told you that with this advance back here, we could expect a massive retreat from the Ukrainians out of this salient. With this advance, you can see how the E50 highway is about to be cut, and that's going to put Kharivka right here into a very difficult position. There is still this road that can be used to the south. But again, once the Russians begin to push down and this fortification becomes threatened, the Russians should be able to cross this land bridge here, threaten Kharivka from the rear, and the entire salient down here is going to fall. You can see how this is just becoming a cascade. We're going to see this continued cascade all the way down this defensive line to Kursk. And then after that, we should see an explosion out here into the Krasnohorivka salient, whether it's an encirclement or a Ukrainian withdrawal, one or the other. Okay. And then moving down here to Konstantinovka, the Russians now control about 50% of the city. They also expanded their zone of control north of this little pond reservoir right here and have reached the northern dacha area of Konstantinovka. With this advance, this pocket for the Ukrainians should close soon, and the Russians should gain further control over the 0532 running into Konstantinovka, which will become the next jumping off point for further pushes into Katarinivka and Antonivka, as well as pushing down the highway towards Vadyan, which is a key to this entire southern pocket. The Russians are moving quick, guys. This whole area is going to cascade, and everybody's just going to be shocked and surprised that the entire south of the Donetsk just kind of collapsed as soon as the Russians came knocking. All right. I have one article to show you guys, and then if you want to throw up some questions, we can. This is probably going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. Don't have as much to talk about. But yeah, here we go. Poorly trained recruits contribute to loss of Ukrainian territory on Eastern Front, commanders say. Let's see. Some new Ukrainian soldiers refuse to fire at the enemy. Others, according to commanders and fellow fighters, struggle to assemble weapons or to coordinate basic combat movements. A few have even walked away from their posts, abandoning the battlefield altogether. While Ukraine presses on with its incursion into Russia's Kursk region, a full-scale invasion into Russia's Kursk region, we should say, because this is the media and that's how they talk, its troops are still losing precious ground along the country's eastern front. A grim erosion that the military commanders blame in part on poorly trained recruits drawn from recent mobilization drive, as well as Russia's clear superiority in ammunition and air power. Some people don't want to shoot. They see the enemy in their firing position in trenches, but don't open fire. That's why our men are dying. said a frustrated battalion commander in Ukraine's 47th Brigade. When they don't use the weapon, they are ineffective. Okay, so this is exactly what we talked about, right? It's when you start press ganging people into the military, when you start abducting human beings and forcing them to go fight in a war that they don't agree with, you're not producing quality manpower. So yes, on paper, you might have X number of brigades, but are those brigades up to combat standards? Are these brigades durable in terms of their morale? Because if morale collapses, the first units whose morale is going to be hit the hardest are the units of the guys that don't want to be there at all. That's these Ukrainians. So this is just a really good reminder of what's going on, and the fact that Ukraine is using some of its best remaining units in the Kursk region does not bode well for the rest of the country. All right, I'm going to look at some of these questions now. Are you for peace? Yes, I've always been for peace. I've always said that negotiations are the best option. I think that that's the only option for Ukraine's survival. Are those negotiations going to be happy and awesome for Ukraine? Absolutely not. But it's the only realistic option that the Ukrainians have if they want to maintain their culture and any sort of sovereignty, in my personal opinion. What do you think about the missile strike on the ferry train? Another strike on a target that is not hugely important. The bridge is still up, so the ferry is inconsequential. And if the bridge goes down, there's a land bridge into Crimea now and a rail line into Crimea, so also inconsequential. The Ukrainians don't have the manpower reserves to push down and cut off Crimea. They tried that last year. It failed. So the obsession with Crimea and the strikes on these targets, again, striking fuel is a very good way to have everybody in the region know that you struck something. It's good for propaganda. It's good for internet morale. Same shit, different day. But yeah. Who do I have winning this war? The Russians. The Russians over just a good long period of time. It's just going to be a slugfest. How come people don't realize World War III is going on? Because nobody has said we're at war, especially the United States. And most human beings would think that if a World War III were to happen, the United States would be the one declaring war on people. So since that hasn't happened, there is no World War III yet, would be my take on it. It's just proxy wars right now, and people don't understand proxy wars. They think Ukraine is actually fighting for themselves. Like stupid people think that. Will Ukraine invade Transnistria? I doubt it, but I don't know. Question: any comment on the 12-year jail sentencing of Russian-American Kinsey Kravana, who donated $50 to a charity supporting Ukraine? Was she arrested? I didn't read about this. I don't read on a lot of the individual, anecdotal things that happen in either of these countries in terms of the way that they treat journalists or anything like that. So I don't. Usually when they do that, they're not going to actually spend 12 years in jail. Is she a Russian-American journalist is she an American that was in Russia and donated to Ukraine? Is she a Russian? I don't know what you mean by Russian American. Is she a Russian citizen who is then arrested? They have laws in place. I mean, it is wartime, but I disagree with putting somebody in jail for 12 years. But again, in Russia, Ukraine is considered a terrorist state that they are technically at war with. Donating to ISIS is not a very good look if you're an American, right? That's kind of what this probably looks like to some Russians. So I don't think she'll spend 12 years in prison, but also don't donate to an enemy country that your country is at war with. Already answered that one. What chances do you see of an internal rebellion in the UA army? Very low at this point. I think anybody who would be willing to do that is pretty much dead. No, yeah, I don't see that happening at all. Everybody is either dead or has been removed. Do you think what is going on is World War III? I think it could. I don't know if it's necessarily World War III yet. I've said multiple times that I think what we're seeing is World War III playing out. But until it reaches a certain point, or until we have historical context and hindsight, we'll never know, right? People didn't know World War II was starting when it was starting. It was just the Germans expanding into their traditional territories, right? And then Poland got invaded. But why does Poland mean that it's a world war? Just because Britain declares war, now it's a world war? Really, the world war didn't start until you could either say Barbarossa or the US got involved, or you can say it was a world war as soon as China invaded Manchuria in the 1930s. You can go all over the place. So I don't know, but I wouldn't be upset with somebody saying that. Yes, Russia lost 1,300 square kilometers and maybe more in just 2 weeks. Okay, that's first off, that number is gigantic. I don't know what map you're looking at for that. Is that contested territory too and everything? Because they definitely have not lost 1,300 square kilometers. But for argument's sake, let's say they lost 1,300 square kilometers. What it was the stated goal by the Ukrainians? It was to gain a stronger position at the negotiating table, right? That is the openly stated position. Was that actually what they were going for? I don't think so. I think that they were going for the Kursk NPP nuclear power plant, and also going for chaos and just seeing what they could get away with, taking every inch that they were handed. So yeah, that's fine. They got some territory, but Ukraine is suffering from a manpower and ammunition shortage already. So what Ukraine just did through this is now they have to maintain 1,300 extra square kilometers of territory in an area that is not friendly to them. They're in Russian territory, with really extremely pushed out logistics lines. And with very little air coverage. So Ukraine just opened up a new front for themselves when they're stuck in a manpower issue. Now, if they were to pull out right now and call it a victory for what they did and what they accomplished, maybe I could see that. They wasted a lot. So I still would argue that this doesn't benefit Ukraine any. They got some propaganda, whatever. But at this point, now that they're doubling down, and now that they're going to stay in Kursk, and they're introducing new units and bringing new units in to try to hold it, no, this is a outright loss for Ukraine in the long run. In the short run, you can talk about PR victories, and I'm going to go ahead and say it again. I've said it a million times. PR doesn't win war, guys. It doesn't. It might extend the war. It might get you some more equipment, but it's not going to change the reality on the ground. It's not. It's never going to do it. So yeah, they captured all that territory, and it does what for them? See, when the Russians are capturing territory in the east, it's slow, but the goal for the Russians in the east isn't to capture the territory necessarily right now. The goal is to destroy the Ukrainian army in front of them. They're doing that very efficiently, and then moving into the areas where the Ukrainian army no longer exists, right? And then once there's no coordinated Ukrainian army defense, then all the territory comes as they wish. I've already answered that one. There are reports that the AFU has allocated 30% of its manpower in Sumy region. I'm surprised AFU still has that much manpower. Well, 30% of 100 people is 30 people. So I don't know what you mean by that much. But I don't think that that's real. I think that if the Ukrainians put 30% of their manpower into the Sumy region, I don't think they'd be able to hold the other areas of their lines at all. So I think it's less than that. And I think the Ukrainian army is quite big. I think you guys maybe think it's very small. It's quite large. It's just running into these issues, even being as big as it is, because they just need more. Scott, as far as I understand, Kursk is just DRG units fighting each other, other DRG units. Basically, it's small squads engaging each other with very mobile combat platforms. We don't see very many tanks. Yeah, a lot of little infantry skirmishes, and that's why I'm not like overly concerned about what's going on in the Kursk region, because the map doesn't reflect the reality of what the fighting is on the ground and doesn't reflect the it looks very serious when you guys look at it on a map. So I get where these questions are coming from, but when you step back and look at the objectives and the possibilities for expansion, or the ability to hold it, you start to realize what the actual equation is for the Ukrainians. Whatever happened to the Kharkov's People Republic, same thing that's going to happen to the Kursk People's Republic. Calibrated, my dear good friend. If the city of Pokrovsk falls, is it game over? It's never game over. It's not game over until Ukraine signs the unconditional surrender. But outside of that, it's going to very greatly increase the speed at which the Ukrainian army in the east collapses, which is going to increase the speed that the Ukrainian army collapses everywhere. Favorite games or movies? I love Terminator. I love favorite games. I like Rainbow Six, but of all time, I really like the Halo series. Off-topic question, but I like it. Is it safe to assume that depleted uranium rounds are now being used in Kursk region? I don't know if depleted uranium rounds are being used anywhere. To be honest, we heard a lot about them. We saw that one weapons warehouse go up that was claimed to have all of the DI munitions, and then we never really saw any of it being used anywhere. So I have no idea. I doubt it, though. What would you advise people? What would you advise people if you knew that the Third World War would start in 2 weeks to enjoy life? No. Figure out how to get out of your place, because Third World War doesn't mean the world is ending necessarily, even if there's nukes being used and stuff. The world isn't going to end, and you can either if you want to be at the center of one of those things, go for it and have fun and do whatever you want to do. But I'm going to try to work it out. See, my whole outlook on life, guys, is no matter what happens, change is just opportunity. So when wars happen, war is just a state change, right? If it's a nuclear war, it's going to be a state change for the human race, but that doesn't mean that the human race is going to disappear entirely from the face of the earth. Most likely, we could, but it's just another opportunity. You could be the leader of the apocalypse, right? That could be beneficial if that's what you're into. You could be anything you want to be when something happens like that. It's your opportunity to make change. Glass half full, silver linings, guys. That's how we look at nuclear war. Question: will this war escalate into full-blown thermonuclear conflict between three nuclear superpowers at once? Possible. Always a possibility. I hope not, but if a side is about to lose and they don't want to lose and they are just shack it and press the buttons, then that's what we're going to get. What happens to Russia? What happens after Russia captures Pokrovsk? Any guesses on the next moves and what the map will look like by December? I think by December, you could have the Battle of Pokrovsk wrapped up in its entirety. I think that could be a very realistic outlook for this region. This is what I had predicted for the Russian summer offensive and into the winter offensive, was to capture the Pokrovsk and the entirety of the south here, which I think is very realistic. Again, I think that the Pokrovsk is a goal. I think the Russians are going to continue pushing in this direction. However, I think pushing south right now is where the Russians are going to yield the most with the least amount of effort. Oh, wait, I'm not on the map. My bad. Oops. Let me redo that. So the Russians aren't pushing into Pokrovsk right now at full speed, right? Because this is where the Ukrainians are able to defend. So the Ukrainians still have staging positions. There's still defensive lines here. The artillery is safe on this part of the salient. This direction right now is the hardest to move in for the Russians. This direction and probably this direction. So while they are moving here, it's going to be slow. It's going to be a grind until they really start to get into this urban area over here, and then it might progress faster through the whole thing. I'm not sure. But for right now, the best thing that the Russians can do is go south, is just continue pushing south, because they can just unravel all of these defense lines here that the Ukrainians are holding. And then once this area is compromised, this frees up so many Russian troops, and Donetsk becomes this deep rear staging area, and the whole front line just becomes much more malleable for the Russians. So this is, I think, is the goal, is to just keep pushing south here. I think entering Pokrovsk and capturing it by December is realistic. Once they capture that, they can go in every single direction. That's the thing about Pokrovsk. They're going to head back east to Konstantinovka through this road. Look, there's 5 major roads that come in here. They can head north up behind Kramatorsk, the salient right here. It might become a salient, actually, and it might force the Ukrainians to retreat out of here if the Russians can push up through the west over this direction. They can also push along the E50 directly into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. That's the first thing I would do if I were the Russians, is I'd push directly into Dnipropetrovsk and start putting a lot of pressure back here and just make this entire area feel very uncomfortable, as well as this area down here to the south. And then they can also push south to Andrivka here, threatening Ugledar and Velika Novosilka and all of this. The Russians are just almost to the point where they will unlock the entire map, and then they'll be able to push in and be much more aggressive in a lot of these different areas. Hi Scott, why you bald? Genetics. Sorry, started going bald when I was like 19. My hair started receding. My dad's bald, my grandpa's bald, my uncle's bald, but it's all good because we all look good bald. So damn, 25. I don't know what that's about. Do you think that we can have World War III that will remain conventional? No. If the second a U.S. aircraft carrier is hit, or the second a Russian military base, a strategic military base inside of Russia is hit, or as soon as something is hit in China, no, nukes will be used. At least tactical nuclear weapons. There's no way you're gonna keep it from getting to that point. Let's see. Yeah, this is part of it. So this is 1,300 square kilometers, talking about Ukrainians in the Kursk region with a population of what, 3,000. So yeah, I always like to just go up and show this. It's really easy to push into territory where there's literally nothing and capture the nothing and push up roads and hide in forests. But you're not doing anything with this. You're not accomplishing anything. In fact, you're exposing yourself greatly to drones and bombs and ambushes and everything we've seen. We've seen more equipment losses in this region in a shorter amount of time than we've ever seen in the east from the Ukrainians, besides potentially when they were on the offensive around Bakhmut. But even then, probably not. This area has, in terms of equipment, has been horrific for the Ukrainians. Questions, anybody? Get them in. Is it a forever war? Another 20-year war? No, probably not. Ukraine doesn't have the human resources to fight this scale of war for a couple more years, let alone 20 years. So no. Unless it expands into a much wider war that has a new resource, a new human resource, then maybe. But at the current state with the current belligerents, no. The Ukraine war will not be a forever war. Do you think after Donbass, Russia will start towards Odessa? No, I think after the Donbass, the Russians are going to focus on the Kharkov region and the Zaporozhye region, and then into the Dnipropetrovsk region, and then focus on the Sumy and Chernigov regions, and then push everything else out to the river. That might all happen very quick, depending on how the Ukrainians retreat out of the region. I don't know. And then maybe Odessa. But that's, I always say that Odessa will never be fought over. If it ever becomes Russian, it will be handed over to the Russians. Or the Russians will just walk right in. Take some weed, chill out. Take some weed. It's the most non-weed smoking way of saying smoke some weed, bro. Just take a little marijuana, my guy. Hello and hit the like button. I appreciate it, friend. Of course, that guy has to have like Satanist shit in his avatar. Gosh, I love you guys. You're funny. If Russians start using 0.5 KT nuclear shells in the 152 millimeter as artillery, would it be a game changer? Yeah, probably. Using nukes anywhere on the battlefield, probably going to be a little bit of a game changer for multiple reasons. Yeah. If you look at Seledove, Andrivka, and Iskra, which are, I believe that is Andrivka, Iskra, and I'm looking for, I don't think it's this Seledove. You might be talking about this one. This one right here. Seledove, Andrivka, Iskra. Yeah, this line. Behind it, there's literally nothing until Povrad. And even behind that, there's nothing. So this is just open space. There is almost no defense line behind it unless you want to just dig in open fields. Propizhnaya. We have a drone in Murmansk region. Did you hear about it? Is it the new stealth drone? I think I saw a satellite picture of the new is it the S70? Is that what they're calling it? It's very cool. Lancet or Switchblade? Lancet. Switchblade has had very hard times with GPS spoofing and stuff like that. And not GPS spoofing, but just electronic warfare. It struggled a lot with electronic warfare, whereas Lancets have proven throughout this war to be incredibly effective and well built. Why is Russia so soft on Ukraine? Too soft is how you put it. Because this is something that I also like to talk about, because they have international partners that they have to adhere to if they want to continue to have good relations with them. So this is part of why I made it such a big deal that Ukraine really pissed off China and India by saying that they were going to work for peace negotiations, getting the Chinese to supposedly get the Russians to stop infrastructure strikes for the time being, to work on these negotiations, and then ended up going through with this Kursk incursion. That really pissed off the Chinese. And so we may see the Russians, quote unquote, take the gloves off. I hate to use that. But just reducing Ukraine's energy generation to something like 10% would be a very effective way of speeding up this war. They don't have the rail logistics to make it to Odessa. Yeah. And that's why I say that it wouldn't be a battle, right? The Ukrainian army would be done fighting by the time the Russians pushed across. You wouldn't need a lot of logistics and stuff like that. Crossing rivers is hard, guys. Just relax, smoke some crack. All right, guys. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. My throat is killing me. I'm hurting. So please go give this a like and leave a comment, guys. It helps me so much. Get seen by the algorithm. We have been killing it lately. My videos have been getting like 20,000 views after the live stream. So like 25 to 30,000 total views, which is don't worry, it wouldn't be a stream without my mic muting. Had to get it right there at the end. I pulled it out. So we are going. We probably won't have a live stream tomorrow, but look for one on Saturday. Go check out the Patreon. There will be a new demonetized episode. It has been recorded, so it will be up. I really appreciate you all so much. And you need to try gaming on shrooms. That sounds impossible. I really appreciate it. Love you guys so much. Take care and enjoy your weekend until I see you next time.